What's up, everybody? Welcome back to DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Here is the full interview. If you've been on our channel the last couple of days, we've been putting out segments. I wanted to interview Lance, and he's so smart and knows so many different things about pitching, about prospects, that our conversation ended up in 5 very random places. So I decided we would just split those up and then post the full interview. So here is the full interview with some of the stuff you may have already seen, as well as some new stuff that were not full clips in our estimation. So lots of good content here. Again, this is Lance Brozdowski of the Marquee Sports Network. Also helps out with some MLB Network stuff. So one of the smartest guys around. Enjoy the full interview with Lance Brozdowski. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by one of my favorite guests on the show, Lance Brozdowski, who is the player development analyst for Marquee Sports Network, covering the Cubs, was a part of MLB draft coverage on MLB Network. He does a million things, and I've said it before, I think he's one of the smarter guys when it comes to talking about baseball. So, Lance, as we approach the trade deadline, everything going on, thanks for making a little time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, as always. Excited to see what you guys do. I feel like this is an impactful trade deadline for a variety of teams, and I'm always skeptical that things actually get done. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, is Sandy going to get traded? Are these big pieces actually going to fall? I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I told you beforehand, I have like 5 topics I wanted to ask you about that are seemingly unrelated to one another. But let's start with one that I think has been a talk amongst Dodgers fans this season. And as somebody who kind of covers the Cubs, you are the perfect person to ask this question. I want to talk about the Michael Busch trade, because this is, a couple years later, an absolutely fascinating one. For a while, last year, Michael Busch, 118 weighted runs created plus. The Dodgers, though, had gotten these 2 prospects, Zaire Hope, who's now 30th in MLB Pipeline's top 100, Jackson Ferris, 96th. It seemed like, oh, man, the Dodgers did this again. They went and got 2 prospects for a guy who's good but not great. And yet this year, Michael Busch is absolutely destroying the ball, 280, 367, 528 slash. And so as a guy who follows the development, follows prospects, and also follows the Cubs, what's your take on the Michael Busch trade and who feels happiest right now?
I think the Cubs feel happiest. Yeah. I think at the time it was a win-win. I didn't go back. I made like this trade calculator thing on my YouTube channel. I encourage you to check out. I've done some trade deadline stuff there. But basically, I plugged in, like, I didn't do it for Busch, but I did it for some other guys. You plug in like the value of the guy going out, and you plug in the prospect value going in. I think if I did that when this trade was executed, it probably would have come out maybe slightly neutral. It depends basically how aggressive you'd project Busch. And that's always the thing in these trades, is like teams are going to have subtly different projections around guys, especially prospects. I think a lot of the data around major leaguers probably gloms around the same point. So there's probably not too much variance in like how you'd project a Michael Busch prior to this season. Now you have to contextualize how well he's been doing this season specifically. His problem last year was kind of covering fastballs up. You know, he crushed down in. This year, he's starting to pull the ball in the air a little bit more, just a general theme on the Cubs as a whole. But he's covered the top of the zone more. Not from a damage perspective. He's just eliminated some of the whiff. And I think that's really vaulted the profile forward. So, you know, I guess you kind of split the baby in this case from projecting him going forward. I think he's probably like a 2 to 3 WAR first baseman, you know, over the rest of the next 4 years. I believe the Cubs have controlled. He'll head into league minimum next year. I think he has 3 years of ARB after that. I think if you rehash this deal, I think the Dodgers would be happy to keep him. But you have to contextualize that at the time. Like, where were they playing Busch? Yep. You know, that is like the thing that I think causes these guys to get traded and be good elsewhere.
Yeah,
I don't think the Dodgers would undo the trade per se. I mean, they got 2 pretty good prospects. Zaire Hope has some of like the most incredible batted ball data in the minors from my perspective. His ability to like lift and hit the ball hard is like kind of off the charts. Ferris has been a little up and down. Really good last year. He's kind of regressed a bit this year. I haven't dug into exactly why, but I still have confidence in him becoming some kind of at least like floor of being like a number 5, number 4 in a rotation, which has a good amount of value. I'm curious on your perspective here, though. Like, I think the main thing is like it's a win-win. I still think it might be a win-win, even if the win is a little bit heavier in the Cubs' direction.
Totally. I agree. And that's the piece, is like, as much as Dodgers fans are like, oh man, Michael Busch, I can't believe we traded this guy. To your point, it's like, where did you want him to play? Like, everybody has decided he can't play second base and he can't play left field. So he's a first baseman at DH.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
you know, Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani are fairly good at those 2 positions. And are going to be at those two positions moving forward. This is kind of the Dalton rushing conversation we're having just a couple years later. But this trade is just funny because I think 6 months ago, everybody's like, oh my gosh, the Dodgers totally fleeced the Cubs. They got these two prospects that weren't top 100 guys. And then, like, I remember talking to the Baseball Prospectus guys. I mean, they have Hope as a top 10 dude in all of Major League Baseball. And so some people aren't as high on him. To your point, Jackson Ferris, maybe the shine is worn off a little bit, but I think it's just a roller coaster trade where it happens and it's like, okay, this is a weird one. And then 12 months later, it's like, oh my gosh, the Dodgers killed them. They got two top 100, top 75 prospects for a guy who's like fine. And now it's swung the other way where in a weird way, maybe it's now fair. Like this, the Dodgers would probably get a little more if they tried to trade Michael Busch today, but I don't know if the Cubs would have parted with Zaire Hope and Jackson Ferris if they had progressed the way that they were progressing either. So it's kind of a funky balance between those two things.
Very funky. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure what the calculus would come out if you like redid the trade right now. It'd be a great question. I do think for the most part, again, I'll go back to the point I just mentioned, like the variance on prospects, especially as we get to the deadline is huge. I think you can't totally take what a lot of people are reporting. I don't want to say accurately, they're clearly getting it from somewhere, but I will emphasize that like I've talked to a lot of different orgs. The prospect value on guys is highly variable. Like you have teams that think like own Casey on the Cubs. He's this big lefty bat, hits for a bunch of power. You know, he's ran into some injuries each of the last couple of years. We'll exactly see where his profile is. He's kind of like Matt Wallner on the Twins in a way, maybe a little bit better. His value is like all over the place. You know, like people think you could get, you know, and you could bring him to the table and get anybody at the deadline. I disagree. I think they have a pitcher in the minors that is better. Like I'm getting into some Cubs stuff here, but it applies to the Dodgers, I think, as well. Like you guys have some pitching prospects that I'd be curious to see the interest level on, like a Nick Frasso off injury, etc. There's a variety of guys in your system, like Sirota. Like they have this glut of outfielders. Yeah. And I don't entirely know how teams would view Zaire Hope. Like, do they view him as like a top 10 prospect? I think most teams probably view him as like an everyday regular. I think a top 10 prospect, maybe a little bit aggressive. His body's like completely maxed out. So like, I'm not totally surprised he's mashing high A pitching. But this is the crux of the deadline is like, how do people view your prospect from a capital standpoint, from a surplus value standpoint? And then, are you actually willing to trade him? Do you have enough confidence, you know, as a team like the Dodgers to do this? I feel like they could go and get one of these big controllable starting pitchers that everyone else wants, like Joe Ryan or Mackenzie Gore, etc. You know, like they have the prospect capital to do it. They put Josue DePaul on the table. Like they could probably woo either of those teams into trading for one of those big arms. Do they want to do that? I have no idea.
Yeah, it's totally fair. It's totally fair. Speaking of that, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is as you are analyzing pitching data and the Dodgers, it seems like it's not going to be starting pitching. It might be like a corner outfield, fourth outfield type. But the biggest thing everybody's talking about, and when I say everyone, I include Dave Roberts in this conversation, is relief help. And so I'm curious from you, as you've looked at sort of the market, the trade deadline. Of course, you're covering the Cubs who, you know, I don't know their specific needs, but I think most teams are probably looking at starting pitching, relief arm, that type of stuff. I'm curious, is there anybody that when you look at that market, that looking at the data that you look at, you find as maybe a guy who's flying under the radar or might be a little undervalued on the relief pitcher side of things?
The under the radar guys, I'm curious to see if they're moved, or I'm going to go on bad teams because I just think there's a higher probability they go. Seth Halverson from the Rockies throws like 100 flat. His fastball shape's like not ideal, but you generally run into this when guys throw really hard. I was actually reading a pretty cool thread from Robert Stock and Kyle Bodie a while back as to how when you touch like 99, 100, 101, when you sit there, there's like some biomechanical limitations that like prevent you from having good fastball shape, which is like a weird thing. So it's like anyone throwing like 100 plus, you can look at the fastball shape and be like, man, it's not that good. And it's like, he throws 100 and he's on the Rockies. You remove him from Coors Field, I think he's going to be a little bit better. So I'm curious to see if the Rockies would move off him. He's a name that I'm just intrigued by generally. And then the Marlins, again, they're in this weird sell mode. Calvin Fauché has like a nasty curveball, really, really good breaker. He walks a lot of guys, so I don't exactly know if he'd push into like leverage on a lot of teams. But again, I wonder what the price is. He's not Bednar, Helsley, Duran, you know, some of these other guys have been floated. He's not Manuel Clase, but I think he's interesting. And then Ronnie Henriquez is a name that has been dealing this year. He has some like really wacky shapes for his slot. And I know the Marlins love him internally, so I imagine they're really trying to clutch him. But he's a name that maybe goes and someone actually is willing to give up a couple pieces for. Apart from that, I'm sure we could sort through all the big names. Ryan Helsley on a rental seems like a really obvious fit for the Dodgers, but I'm curious to see if some of those weirder below the radar names get moved for more than people think and then pitch really well. And like a Ronnie Henriquez is the most, impressive deadline find for some team, and no one really knows who he is right now.
Yeah, when I talked to Fabian Ardaya at The Athletic, he kind of said, I don't know if they're going to shop at the top of the market, but I'm guessing they're going to find a guy they feel comfortable with in like the 8th or 9th inning of games in September and October, which those two things feel contradictory. And yet
feels like Helsley, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Feels like Helsley.
Exactly. and that's that. It just seems like it would make the most sense because it's not often that those guys at the top of the market, Jax, Duran, Clase, they have so much team control. Like those guys are like through 27, 28. And so there's paying for a top end relief pitcher, but then also having to pay the 3.5 years of that premium, which I think is going to complicate things. To your point, the Dodgers have the guys if they wanted to go get them, but we know Andrew Friedman doesn't love paying for relief pitching. And the next question I wanted to ask you is, he went out and paid for relief pitching twice this offseason, Lance, and neither of them worked. Kirby Yates was a 1-year deal, but Tanner Scott was the big contract, and neither of these guys has been awesome. Tanner Scott is, of course, hurt right now, but when you dig into like the pitch mix, the data on these two, let's start with Kirby Yates. 4.3 ERA. It would be the worst since 2016 in any season in which he's thrown more than 8 innings. The splitter is just not good. Like it went from being one of the best pitches in baseball to the batting data against it. It's like now a really bad pitch. So what do you see with Kirby Yates? And I guess the bigger question, is it fixable?
Yeah, Yates, I unfortunately don't think I have like the solve on. Scott, I think I have a better theory. You can team me on that after I go on Yates. But the thing with Yates is like, he's such a simple pitcher. I feel like sometimes I tend to overthink the simplicity of certain pitchers, especially relievers, where it's like he only throws 2 pitches. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's throwing fastball like 60% of the time. And it's like, if the shape didn't really change, which it didn't dramatically, I know Stuff Plus has his fastball down slightly. He's lost like a slight bit of carry. My answer here might just be that he's 38 years old.
Yeah.
Like, I just think as you run into like those higher rung of age brackets, it's really hard to project guys, even if they've been really successful. You just accept so much variance at that age. This is like the Merrill Kelly discussion I was having with someone earlier today about, would you qualifying offer him? He's 36 years old. Like I don't know. Like when I signed him to a 3-year deal, like he's gonna be 39 pitching for you. Like I get he's had success and we haven't seen him fall off, but like as you push into 38, 39, like your chance of falling off like skyrockets. We've seen it with Verlander and Scherzer and a bunch of other guys. The things that I see, the 4-seam fastball to lefties is like being hit in the air a ton. I think it has like a 75% fly ball rate relative to like 40% last year. And the big thing that jumps out to me is early count chases down for him a lot. He was getting like above league average around like 35 to 40%, I think. Now he's like below 30%. League average is somewhere in the 30s, low 30s about there. So that for me is like a weird spot. It's like, okay, he's giving up more damage in those situations. When he gets to 2-strike spots, he kind of looks the same to me from the data standpoint, which basically means if you see result stats that are bad there, because he's a reliever and he's only thrown like 20 or 30 innings, I'm happy just projecting some regression back. But the fastball in particular is the thing. He doesn't really have finite command. Like he's a reliever. Like relievers generally don't have finite command. Yeah. So if he loses like a half mile per hour and an inch of vertical break on the 4-seam, and he's still trying to rip it middle, and he runs into some location variance, like that might be enough for him in a small sample to just look bad. I guess I'm just somewhat confident he reverts back, and if he doesn't, my angle is probably ageist, but he's 38 years old. Like I don't really know what the fix is. You're not going to give him another pitch. You're kind of just hoping he can go back to throwing split like 45, maybe just push the split up 45, 50% of the time. Like the location there looks fine to me. It's all below the zone. He's still getting relatively decent swing miss. The fastball is what's giving up damage. I know the run value on the splitter is bad, but for the most part, the underlying whiff data, I think overall it's actually slightly up, which is a little weird. So I guess my answer is age. That's what I'm giving you on Yates. I don't know.
Real quick on Yates, and you may not have seen these quotes because this is probably like very niche Dodgers, but he was asked about it, and he talked about like the seams on the baseball as possibly being part of the reason. I mean, I love you laugh. Like, is this just like a pitcher speak for like, I don't really have answers, but maybe it's the baseball?
I mean, it's kind of a funny excuse. I don't doubt that it could affect a guy. Like pitchers are very feel based. I would say the age card is higher. Like you can't project a guy as stable in the age 38, 9, 40 seasons as you can prior, regardless of the success level he has. So, I mean, yeah, the ball's different. Like, I've heard this from a variety of teams. I heard it from the Dodgers, a couple sources there. Like, people were on this early. I think there was some data refuting it initially, and then, Saris put out a really good piece about it. There's just variance in the ball. And, like, yeah, if he thinks that the ball differential is causing, like, some of the four-seam regression specifically, I get it. But then I'd also look at some other guys on the Dodgers, like Yoshinobu Yamamoto and others, who just have better fastball shape out of nowhere. And I can't tell why. There's no slot change or anything. And that might be a benefactor of the ball. So, I don't know. Does it like even out on every team where like some guys are helped and others are hurt to the point where like it's all net neutral? Like I'm not sure. I'm not going to tell Kirby Yates he's wrong. I just think it's kind of like a funny way to cite that he's having some trouble with fly ball rate and stuff. Like I don't know. I'm not going to tell him he's wrong.
The splitter, by the way, he had a 139 slugging percentage against that pitch last year, and it's up to 415 this year. So pretty bad.
There you go.
Let's talk
maybe
Tanner Scott.
I'm underselling that specifically, but
Tanner Scott. He has been awesome at times, and he has been atrocious at other times. I think the layman's answer that I have heard is location, that he has not been locating his pitches. But that is a layman's example that I'm getting from secondhand. So I'm curious from you, when you dig into Tanner Scott, what jumps out to you as to why a guy who might have been the best reliever in baseball a year ago now has a 4.1 ERA and a home run rate that has tripled?
Yeah, I think this is a funny one. You're saying location here. So I think my theory is a little bit better here. I'll say primarily because I sourced it with a couple people, not in the Dodgers org, but I think he's in the zone too much. Yeah, I know that sounds really weird, but he's a guy who's kind of lived on edges and chase. And I wonder if there's something permeating from the Dodgers of like, we walked a lot of guys. I think we talked about this in spring, didn't we? Where they like had, I think it was low walk rates, high barrel rates. So they went after some guys that were like out of the zone more.
Yeah.
Like Yates and Scott specifically, who both had like meddling zone rates. And I was like, ooh, I wonder if they're trying to push away from the barrels.
Yeah.
And what we've seen specifically with Scott, if you look at early count situations to righties, he's up in zone rate, I think like 8-ish percentage points, which is a pretty considerable leap. And I wonder if that just like his fastball is good. It's a good pitch, but a lot of the time when you just generally locate fastballs in the zone, you're going to have troubles not allowing barrels on it.
Yeah.
So what we've seen a lot of the time is teams like the Brewers and others push towards like cut shapes, et cetera, to try to mitigate some of that barrel rate, especially if the four seam isn't good. What I'm saying with Scott is like, I wonder whether there was an initiative where it was like, let's get him in the zone more. We think this stuff will play. And it hasn't. And he hasn't really corrected out of it because like the walk rate's down. It looks really good, right? So some of the underlying stuff there is like, oh, he's fine. He'll regress, like blah, blah, blah. He's giving up too many home runs. I'm not totally confident that if he continues to throw in zone as much as he is, especially in early count spots, he will like continue to just play the regression card and end up better from like a general overall performance and batted ball standpoint. So the thing that I think specifically that early count four seam trouble is having is that when he gets then into deep count situations, he's pushing to the slider more, which I don't really think the slider is that great of a pitch, especially in two strike spots. It's fine, but his bread and butter is the fastball. So it's this weird spot where like, I don't think the fastball has been as good because it's in the zone. And then because he's getting beat up early, I think he's lost some confidence in deep count spots where he's not using the fastball, which is where I want the fastball. So I guess that's a really long-winded way for me to say, like, I'd actually prefer him to be out of the zone more. I want him trying to induce more chase. I think he's a weird enough pitcher where he doesn't need to hang in the zone. I know it's very counterintuitive for a reliever specifically, but as might be the only guy in the history of the sport where I'm looking at him and going, I don't like that the walk rate is down so much because look at how the barrels have jumped. So another really weird one, man. I'm a bit stunned that both these guys haven't been that good because these were guys, speaking of the Cubs, that I think Cubs fans and I was championing for to pay up for because like they've run into some relief issues early in the year and we're throwing out like Pomeranz and Chris Flexen and having success. And it's like, it would be lovely to have Tanner Scott or Kirby Yates, but I guess given the results, they maybe dodged a bullet. So I guess to wrap this all up, I think Scott will continue to struggle. And I think Yates will kind of even back out into form. Okay. And if I'm wrong on those, then it's Yates is just old and he's toast. And the other angle on Scott is that like maybe there is something mechanically there that's off that you can maintain in zone this much and still generate the whiff.
Yeah.
Tough one, man.
Okay, let's shift gears again. I mentioned you were part of MLB Network's draft coverage. Always fun to see you as a part of that. Dodgers kind of had a funky draft. And so I want to start big picture with just like overall thoughts on some of the guys they took at the top of the draft, if any of those guys were guys you like. And then I want to talk about the fact that one of their top prospects that some people thought they drafted it doesn't appear is actually going to sign in 6th rounder Mason Ligenza. So let's start with guys that you liked or just overall thoughts you had about the Dodgers draft class.
Yeah, I was pretty focused on the top of the draft. So the first 3 rounds is what I was on coverage for. And then Jim Callis takes over. He has like an encyclopedic memory on all these guys beyond there. So I limited myself. I think I had about 30 or 40 arms I looked at specifically. They just gave me all the arms. So I was on Zach Root and Cam Leiter specifically. So Root is interesting. He's not a Dodger pitcher is the main thing I would point out. So his primary fastball is like this 2-seam fastball. And if you think about it, okay, he's a lefty. He's kind of like weird. He's kind of like old-timey mechanics. I think I wrote in one report I did on him or something. It just looks weird. It's like an odd visual for a hitter. But that sinker is weird specifically because it has high zone, low swing. So that implies there's a lot of called strikes on it. My angle here, and I was talking to Tony Vitello of Tennessee about this because they faced him. He was like, yeah, guys just like kind of freeze on it because he throws it at you and it kind of tails back to the plate. It's actually very similar to what Tarek Skubal does. I'm not saying he's Tarek Skubal, but that's general idea of like, man, I don't know why this sinker works oppo-handed. Those generally suck. And then you look at his and it goes, well, why does his work? I just think it might be weird enough and he has enough command for it to work. The angle here that's fascinating, and I would keep an eye on early, especially in the next spring. He's got to add a 4-seam fastball. He flashed a few at Arkansas that looked fantastic to me from a shape perspective, where I was like, I think that's why the Dodgers are drafting him, because there's 2 fastballs here. And if he could get to a more playable 4-seam from his slot with some carry, like you really start to turn him into a kind of a funky pitcher. Now, I did have some others say like kind of poo-poo the pick, which I thought was pretty interesting, and talking to other teams where they're just like, it's an interesting pick for the Dodgers because generally they swing for upside. And a lot of people didn't really think Root had like the level of upside that the Dodgers generally prefer to try to access. But I think he's high probability major leaguer. I don't know the impact level. And I would definitely focus on the 4-seam fastball because I wonder if over time he turns into more of a 4-seamer guy.
Okay. What about Leiter?
Yeah, Leiter's one that I think a lot of people projected inside the first round, or at least the people who talked to Scott Boras, because he was pushing him a couple of days before the draft as a first rounder. And of course, he doesn't go first round. I'm not surprised. He was hurt a lot, high release. The big thing here is there's really a nugget on this. So he has this weird thing where he would jump into his fastball and not into his breaking ball. So if you look at his extension down the mound differential between those pitches, you generally do see some variance, but he had variance almost up at a foot. So you're talking about like a 12-inch difference where like he just was he would like really intent the fastball, and then the breaking stuff he'd kind of shy off. This is an easy fix to me, and I imagine the Dodgers will just have him up the intent on everything. We'll see where the command goes off that. I don't know if there's data to back this up, but those guys who are a little jumpy or big extension, I wonder, if you're forcing that extension, it's not more of a natural trait based on like your hip mobility and a variety of other T-spine extension things that you could get into that big extension, whether you start to see a variance in command. This is more of like an upside play for me. I like it, but it's high variance, and he does fit the mold of a Dodger arm, right?
Yeah,
he throws hard. It's a high release. It's a little funky. They'll probably give him some kind of better slider, and then we'll kind of go from there. But yeah, that's just the nugget I have on like the extension part being a little weird with him at FSU.
One other question I wanted you to ask you. I mentioned Mason Ligenza was the Dodgers' 6th round pick. We have a guy. What's that?
Oh, I said sorry. I forgot to answer.
No. You're good. Yeah. We have a prospect guy who comes on our show, and he said there was a chance that if Ligenza had signed, he might have been the highest ranking of all the draft picks as far as his sort of Dodgers prospect rankings. But then they failed to sign him. Guys that get drafted in the top 10 rounds, it's like a 95% sign rate. And so, not that you have specific information on this guy, but in your estimation, how does it happen? Like, it seems like you draft this guy maybe with a conversation having already happened, and yet he's going to school. So what do you make of situations like this?
Yeah, I can't speak to his prospect status. Again, I was really focused on the arms. He's a bat, right? He's an outfielder.
Yeah, high school bat.
Yeah, so this is weird, man. I think we're at a particular time where NIL is a bit juiced from like how much money you can get standpoint. And I wonder whether that is having some influence. We see Angel Cervantes, who's a California high school guy from the Pirates, not signed. That's an even more like, what on earth happened there? Because someone on the beat there is going to have to ask Sherrington like how that didn't happen. You know what I mean? Because like he's a good high school pitching prospect. Like he's a guy that kind of got to land in order for that class to make sense. I know they got Seth Hernandez, but I don't think necessarily that this guy's like one that they needed to land to make the draft class work. I would imagine, my understanding is yes, like these scouting directors are always on the phone prior to these draft picks. There are situations where guys get jumped though. I know this has happened. It's happened actually this year. I won't mention team names, but it happened in the second round with one individual team where they thought they had a guy, they had a deal on a handshake, and then 3 picks earlier, he just goes to another team. So like, I don't know how that specifically happens. Like, does that agent just not tell the other team that maybe this other team might swoop in? Like, well, yeah, he'll take 2-5, and then he goes 3 picks ahead of you, and he takes 2-4 to go with another team. I don't know. Like, this is the chess match, and I imagine there's a lot of like sweating picks. Like, hey, we're almost in fantasy football season. I'm starting to do some prep, but you sweat picks, right? Like a guy's like falling, and you're like, oh, is he going to get to me? And then 2 picks away, and it's like, oh, he's still there, and then he goes right before you. Like, I wouldn't say it's completely dissimilar from what happens in draft rooms a lot of the time. They like think they have a guy, and then you go a couple spots later and you don't. So I wouldn't read too much into it. I imagine Friedman might speak on it. I'm not entirely sure if this is something that is on the priority list of beat writers in LA to like ask about this 6th rounder, but I'd be curious to see what they say. Like, I think I would wait to see what they said. But I will caution that NIL stuff's very weird, where it's like, I think it's going to contract slightly based on roster sizes, or there's something along the lines. Someone was telling me about this, where it's like the pool of money on the NIL side is going to be capped for sports based on schools. So like, a big school is like going to have to pull back way on a sport that they don't care about, especially some of these large SEC programs. I wonder if like this is the year where his agent's like, dude, you could go to school and get $300K for a year. Yeah. He's like, it might take you 5 years to get to AAA with the Dodgers. I wonder whether that's the calculus he's running there and if it's just better for him.
Yeah, and the NIL stuff, like it's possible they had an agreement, and then I believe Pitt is where he was committed to, and he's like, hey, I'm signing with the Dodgers, and they're like, well, what if the number got bigger on our end? And he's like, and the Dodgers are like, yo, we thought we had an agreement, but he's like, well, now I'm getting more money and I changed my mind and that kind of thing. So, okay, one last question, and I maybe just tease this because I'm sure it's something that you'll talk about on your channel at some point, and we can point people to that as well. But you and I were talking offline about the Dodgers as a pitch development organization. I think in general, they are viewed as the best at, just about everything, and pitching development, pitch specific development, I think they've been on the front end of. I'm curious, as the last 18 months has transpired, not that anything specific has happened, but are other teams catching up to them? Do you think the Dodgers are losing ground in this race? What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think most people would say they've been the best of the last 3-4 years, and I wouldn't refute them at all. I do think there's a really good argument they're not at the top anymore. There's been some teams that have risen that, like, I don't necessarily know if the public's totally on, but like the Tigers, everyone lauded their draft. They have incredible results in the minor leagues, really good pitching prospects. They've done a great job at the major leagues as well, which implies some synergy between departments on the major league and minor league side. The Mets specifically, too, they brought in Eric Yagers, who's with the Reds. They've done a fantastic job. They have some of the best underlying peripherals in the majors this year. And they play in some weird parks, too. So I'm not saying from like a batted ball standpoint. I think Brooklyn always has the wind pulling in. So like I'm removing that. I'm just looking at like strikeout and walk specifically. Yeah. They do a really good job there. I think they're number 1 in the minor leagues by like kind of like a bullet. Like they're up there. And they've done a really good job on the major league side too. They got Griffin Canning to be good. They converted Clay Holmes successfully into a starter. So I think it's far more up for debate than it has been in each of the last couple of years. I think this is somewhat inevitable too. Like I wouldn't say the Yankees are like kind of lapping them on the seam effect side. Like I think the Dodgers are right there with them in terms of the modeling they have. They have some incredibly sharp people. But it's hard to refute the fact that like the Dodgers have had more injuries generally. I would say those injuries have been correlated around a certain point, so they look a little worse than if they were spread out. They've had a ton of guys get injured. They've also graduated a ton. So that's another thing. If you talk to the Dodgers internally, it's like, hey, why aren't you guys good at developing pitchers anymore? They're like, hey, man, look over the last 6 years. Like we have developed more starting pitching WAR, regardless of whether it's still on the team, than probably any team in baseball. Yeah. And I would agree with that as well. Now, again, it's like reflect versus project. Like they have been the best. Will they continue to be the best? My answer is that I think it's a much flatter tier. I think it's them, the Yankees. I would say, again, the Tigers and the Mets, I think, are right there. And then there's probably some other teams that are in that window. I think the thing in talking to some sources that people can't get past when I ask this question is how high the walk rate is for the Dodgers in the minors. I believe it's number 1 in the minors by a large margin. The teams around them are like the Angels, the Nationals, and the Rockies, and the D-backs, like teams that are not good at developing pitchers. Yeah. But again, the Dodgers miss a lot of bats, throw really hard, etc. Thing I've heard from them internally is just like, I don't really care if like we'll get it on the runway. I've heard as a metaphor a couple times where it's like we just want the stuff and then we'll figure out the command later. It's tough, man. I think I wouldn't say the window's closed on them being like one of the best teams from a development standpoint, but they don't have the edge they've had. And I'm not saying they can't come up with another edge, but yeah, I don't think they're number 1 with a bullet anymore. I'll put it like that.
I love it. Okay. Well, it's good stuff. Lance, let people know where they can find you on YouTube, because all the content that you're giving us here, you go way deeper on and in way more, a lot of effort, a lot of time that I know go into your
Thanks.
videos. So let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, YouTube, definitely trying to grow that. It's been fun over the last couple of years to grow it and stuff and get some traction. So it's just my name, Lance Broz, should pop up. I have a Substack as well. There's a premium tier there if you're interested in like pitching prospect ranks and a lot of non-public data on the pitching prospect side of things. I can give you Jackson Ferris's shapes, for example. That'll be in my top, I think I have like a top 40 update coming out at the end of August I'm shooting for. So yeah, check both those out if you want to support and don't think I'm talking too fast or something along those lines.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks, Lance. We always love having you. Thanks to everybody for hopping on as always. Again, if you're new here, please go ahead, hit the subscribe button, go to Lance's channel at Lance Bros, hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell there as well. And just a note, we do have a Dodger Blue app now, the DodgerHeads show, all DodgerBlue.com's content. So go ahead, download that in the App Store, wherever you find it. That is Lance. I am Jeff. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. As always, go Dodgers.